In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook lived a woman named Sarah. She had recently moved into a charming little house with her husband, David, and their 2 young children, Lily and Ethan. The neighborhood seemed idyllic, with friendly neighbors and well-kept lawns. Little did Sarah know that the neighbor living next door, Mr. Thompson, would turn her life into a living nightmare. At first, things were relatively normal. Sarah and her family settled in, unpacking boxes and making the house their own. The Thompsons seemed friendly enough, waving hello and exchanging pleasantries when they crossed paths. Mr. Thompson, a middle-aged man with a disheveled appearance, always seemed to be lurking around his yard, tending to his overgrown garden or tinkering with something in his garage. As weeks turned into months, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Thompson's constant presence was becoming more than just coincidental. There were times she'd glance out her window and catch him staring at their house, an eerie smile plastered on his face. She tried to brush it off as her imagination, but her unease grew with each passing day. Late one evening, Sarah was alone at home, putting her kids to bed while David was at a work conference. She heard a soft tapping on the window. Heart racing, she turned to see Mr. Thompson standing just outside, his face illuminated by the dim light of the street lamp. His gaze was fixed on her, and a shiver ran down her spine. She closed the curtains and locked all the doors, feeling a mixture of fear and confusion. The next morning, Sarah found a single red rose on her doorstep, its petals slightly wilted. She felt a sense of dread as she picked it up, a feeling that intensified when she noticed Mr. Thompson watching her from his yard. She hurried inside, locking the door behind her. The rose served as a chilling reminder of his unwelcome attention. Days turned into weeks, and the situation escalated. Sarah began noticing strange sounds outside her house at night, faint scratching noises and whispers carried by the wind. She confided in David, who reassured her that she was probably just stressed from the move. But Sarah knew something was off, and her anxiety only grew. Sarah's sleepless nights became more frequent as the eerie occurrences continued. She would wake up in a cold sweat, convinced she had heard footsteps outside her window or whispers in the darkness. The red roses kept appearing on her doorstep, each one more unsettling than the last. She decided it was time to take action. Determined to put her mind at ease, Sarah decided to confront Mr. Thompson. One sunny afternoon, she marched over to his house, her heart pounding in her chest. She knocked on his door, and after what felt like an eternity, he opened it with a smile that sent shivers down her spine. She mustered her courage and asked him directly if he had been watching her or leaving the roses. His smile faltered, and he denied any involvement, claiming she must be mistaken. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She could feel his gaze lingering on her, and she knew in her gut that he was lying. She left his house feeling even more unsettled than before. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she heard a tapping on her window again. This time, she was ready. She slowly approached the window, her heart pounding. As she pulled the curtains aside, she came face to face with Mr. Thompson's grinning visage. She screamed, stumbling backward and tripping over her own feet. David rushed into the room, concern etched on his face. He saw Mr. Thompson outside the window and wasted no time. He charged out of the house, confronting the man who had been tormenting his wife and family. Shouting match ensued, and it was clear that Mr. Thompson had lost whatever semblance of normalcy he once had. Just as the confrontation reached its peak, the unexpected happened. A police car pulled up in front of Mr. Thompson's house, lights flashing. Officer Anderson, a friend of the family, stepped out of the car. He had been patrolling the neighborhood and had noticed the commotion. Officer Anderson quickly assessed the situation and intervened, separating David and Mr. Thompson. With his calm and authoritative presence, he managed to get the truth out of Mr. Thompson. It turned out that he had developed an unhealthy obsession with Sarah, believing her to be his long-lost daughter who had died tragically years ago. His grief had twisted into something dark and sinister. Officer Anderson wasted no time in taking control of the situation. He informed David and Sarah that Mr. Thompson's disturbing fixation had escalated beyond just watching and leaving roses. He had been secretly collecting personal items from their trash, building a shrine of sorts in his basement, filled with pictures of Sarah and her family. Shaken to the core, Sarah and David realized the gravity of the danger they had been living with right next door. Officer Anderson assured them that they were safe now, and he arrested Mr. Thompson on charges of stalking, harassment, and trespassing. As the police car pulled away with Mr. Thompson in the back, Sarah finally felt a sense of relief wash over her. In the aftermath of the ordeal, Sarah and David took extra precautions to ensure their safety. They installed security cameras around their property, reinforced their doors and windows, and made sure to communicate with their neighbors about what had transpired. The tight-knit community was both shocked and supportive, rallying around Sarah and her family. Months passed without any sign of Mr. Thompson. The red roses ceased to appear on their doorstep, and the feeling of being watched slowly faded. Sarah's sleepless nights turned into peaceful slumbers, and her children were able to play outside without her constant worry. However, just when they thought the nightmare was over, they received a letter in the mail. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was a letter from Mr. Thompson, filled with disturbing ramblings and twisted declarations of affection. Sarah shuddered as she read the words, realizing that the man's obsession was far from extinguished. Terrified once again, Sarah contacted Officer Anderson, who reassured her that they would take the necessary steps to protect her family. The police intensified their efforts to keep tabs on Mr. Thompson, ensuring that he could not harm Sarah or her loved ones any further. As time went on, Sarah learned to live with the trauma of the ordeal. She and her family continued to heal, finding strength in each other and the support of their friends and neighbors. The once peaceful neighborhood had been tainted by fear, but the community's solidarity prevailed. Eventually, Mr. Thompson was declared mentally unstable and was confined to a psychiatric facility. Sarah's family was granted a restraining order, providing them with a much-needed sense of security. While the scars from their neighbor's dark obsession would never fully fade, they were determined to move forward, leaving the nightmare behind them. Nestled within the heart of the tranquil suburban haven known as Willowbrook, an aura of unease gradually enveloped the neighborhood. The streets, once alive with the laughter of children and the cheer of families, now seemed to resonate with an underlying tension. The cause of this disturbance? A man who had recently taken residence in the long vacant house on Elm Street. Tall and foreboding, the newcomer's presence cast a long shadow that seemed to stretch into the very hearts of the residents. The rumors that began to circulate about his past only intensified the sense of foreboding. Whispers spoke of his previous occupation as a principal at a school with a dark reputation. The school had been a breeding ground for stories of misdeeds and unexplainable occurrences, a nexus of shadows where fear thrived. As the man settled into his new abode, the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting the secrets he might unearth. The once vibrant community now had a new focal point, a mysterious figure whose past remained shrouded in darkness. Days melted into nights, and the man's unsettling aura began to cast its pall over the lives of those who called Willowbrook home. Tom, a curious and inquisitive resident, found himself drawn to the enigma that was their new neighbor. Restless nights and hushed conversations formed the backdrop of his existence, his curiosity steadily transforming into an obsession. Whispers among the neighbors grew more elaborate as they described peculiar occurrences emanating from the man's garage. Stories of strange lights and unusual sounds infiltrated their conversations, sending shivers down their spines. In the dead of night, when the stars held their breath and the moon dared not shine, Tom's footsteps led him to the enigmatic glow that spilled through the garage windows. Cloaked in darkness, Tom ventured across the dew-kissed grass, his heartbeat an erratic drum against his chest. The garage window beckoned him, a portal into the unknown. With each step, the chill of the night seemed to seep into his very bones, making his pulse quicken and his breath hitch. He had to know the truth that lay hidden behind the shadows. As he peered through the window, the scene that unfolded before him left him paralyzed with shock and horror. The man stood amidst a haunting arrangement of flickering candles and arcane symbols, his movements deliberate and methodical. His hands traced intricate patterns in the air, as if weaving a sinister tapestry of malevolent intent. Tom's blood ran cold as he realized that he was witnessing something beyond his comprehension, a ritual of darkness that defied all reason. But then, as if a force beyond the veil sensed Tom's presence, the man's head turned with unnatural swiftness. Their eyes locked, and a jolt of fear electrified Tom's every nerve. Time seemed to hang suspended, his heart pounding like a war drum. The man's gaze bore into him, piercing through the darkness as though peering into the very depths of his soul. The weight of that gaze sent Tom reeling backward, his instincts screaming at him to flee. He tore himself away from the window, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his mind a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. What he had witnessed defied the boundaries of his understanding, plunging him into a realm of darkness he had never known. With his heart racing and his thoughts in turmoil, Tom fled the scene, his mind haunted by the man's piercing stare. He reached the safety of his own home, locking himself within its walls as if to escape the malevolent force that seemed to linger in the air. As the night pressed on, Tom's sleep was restless, plagued by dreams of shadows and ancient incantations, a cacophony of fears that refused to be silenced. The morning sun broke the grip of night's torment, casting a feeble light that attempted to dispel the lingering darkness within Tom's mind. He tried to rationalize the events of the previous night, convincing himself that what he had witnessed was merely a product of his imagination. Yet, the image of the man's sinister ritual continued to dance before his eyes, an indelible stain on his consciousness. Tom's unease only grew. He found himself stealing glances toward the neighbor's house, half expecting to see the enigmatic figure lurking in the shadows. His sense of security shattered. He felt a perpetual gaze upon him, as if the man's chilling eyes followed his every move. 2 days after the fateful encounter, as dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Tom ventured a glance outside his window. His breath caught in his throat as he saw the neighbor standing at the plot line that separated their properties. His imposing figure stood there, unmoving, like a sentinel of malevolence. The two locked eyes once more, sending a shiver down Tom's spine. It was as though the man's gaze held a silent promise, an unsettling understanding that they were irrevocably linked. Pulling the curtains closed, Tom sought refuge from the neighbor's gaze. Yet, the creeping sensation of being watched lingered, an insidious presence that nestled deep within his mind. Night after night, he found himself battling insomnia, lying awake in bed as the sounds of the neighborhood dissolved into a symphony of unsettling whispers. In the moonlit hours, a strange rustling outside his window sent his heart racing. He strained his ears, the air charged with an ominous energy. Was it merely the wind, or did something more sinister lurk in the shadows? His pulse quickened, and beads of sweat formed on his brow as he imagined the neighbor's malevolent figure lurking just beyond his sight. Months passed, each day marked by an undercurrent of fear. The ominous presence of the neighbor cast a shadow over every interaction, a specter that refused to be exorcised. Yet, one fateful day, a sense of relief dawned on the horizon. Whispers among the neighbors began to circulate that the man was preparing to leave the neighborhood. His brooding figure, once an indomitable presence, seemed to diminish, its malevolence receding like a tide. The atmosphere of the community shifted, as if an oppressive weight had been lifted. Through a conversation with a neighbor, Tom learned that the man had secured a position at another school, a school notorious for its own dark history. The revelation sent a shiver down his spine, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. The cycle seemed destined to repeat, a perpetual journey through the darkness, as the man's unsettling past followed him like a haunting specter.